And then coming back to the last of your questions, what will China run out of steam? Once you've been to the store and you've bought the latest computer, what then? Where is China going? Now, it's interesting how our ideas on this have changed, and I'll give you two examples. When I may have mentioned this, but when Sarah and I went to China in about 2003 or 4 to Tsinghua, we sat down with an American computer scientist who was visiting Tsinghua, and we asked him, is China becoming an innovator in science, and particularly computing? And he said, well, they're moving along. So I said, when will they make as good hardware as America? And he said, about 30, 40 years. When will they make as good software as America? Never. They don't have the intellectual curiosity, ingenuity, imaginativeness to become a Bill Gates. And then I read an essay by a former student in our department who now teaches in the Virgin Islands. He's an anthropologist, and he wrote an essay for a Danish magazine in 2012 about why is the West frightened of China. And he said there's no real need. Among other things, he said, they won't challenge us, by implication, at our core economic level, because no important scientific or technological innovation has come out of China yet. And there is no Chinese business firm which can compete with the big businesses of the West. Now, that was 2012. Think Huawei.
Yeah, exactly.
Think Tencent. Think Alibaba.
Yeah.
They don't just compete. In terms of many technologies, China, Lenovo and the rest of them are ahead. WeChat. Now that takes us to what I think is the answer. Firstly, two parts. One is that moving into the 21st century, technology doesn't proceed, as my friend Jerry Martin pointed out to me, doesn't proceed, as many people think, as in an evolutionary way. That is, as he said, you don't go from the horse and cart and speed up and make faster and faster horses and faster and better carts, and then suddenly you have a car. You don't go from a propeller aeroplane and make it faster and faster, and then you have a jet.
Yeah.
It is a quantum leap. It is a chaos theory change. Everything has changed. The rules have changed. You don't play cricket faster and faster and get football. The rules are changed. You have an invention, a macro invention of a new kind. And what is happening in China now, I think, is that for various reasons, you have macro inventions occurring on a scale which is not occurring in the West. I think the new Chinese cities and the new Chinese communication systems, and perhaps the new Chinese educational systems and the new Chinese health systems are not just taking what they got from us and making them better and better and better and more efficient. They are quantum leaps. To take two examples, their train systems, their fast speed trains are not just faster steam trains or electric trains. They're not just taking even the Japanese bullet trains. They are a quantum leap faster and better. Or again, their health systems. You see, to solve the problem of world health, or the problem, say, of Western health systems, the way in which the path of health in the West has gone in the last 150 years since we discovered how to deal with bacteria and so on, is basically to pour more and more money into institutions like hospitals or doctors' surgeries to solve health. And of course, that is failing, because all it does in an Ivan Illich sort of way is produce more disease, because you push the disease upwards to old age, and you get the cures become more and more expensive. So it's a bottomless pit. And each time you hear a health secretary or health unions say, you know, we need more money, you know, it's like saying we need more roads for more cars. It just creates more problems. So you need to think laterally and start again. And the thing I just was reading about the other day is that the Chinese are doing, and we saw it just beginning, smart medicine. That is, on your mobile phone, you have what is out there for all of us, you know, all the information about most diseases and what you can do about them on your smartphone. Self-diagnosis and self-cure is there for 95% of human diseases. I mean, people are complaining in this country that people are sending their children into hospitals when they don't need to go to hospitals because they just got a cold. So if their parents looked at the symptoms for colds, they see they got colds, but they don't. They send them to A&E. Now, the Chinese are doing this on a really massive and systematic scale. We saw this in a new village near Chengdu, you know, 4 years ago or whatever. The local health clinic, staffed by just someone who'd had a year of training, sort of barefoot doctor of our age, with a good computer. Someone came in saying, I've got a tummy upset. They would look at their computer. Is this a symptom? Is that a symptom? Is that? They'd sort out what it was. And in 99% of cases, they say what you need is there on my shelf.
Right.
It's only in 1% of cases you need to go to a better hospital. And in 1% of those hospitals, you need to go to this. I mean, I saw this in Nepal years ago. I first realized this because when we first went to the Nepalese village, there was no health care anywhere. I mean, the local hospital was tiny and didn't have much, and certainly in the village. And when Sarah and I went back, and we saw a disease-logged society with many kinds of disease, and yet the prescriptions were simple. And with a book like Where There Is No Doctor, you looked up and you said, well, they've got worms, give them worm medicine, which is very cheap, and we had. So we set up a little dispensary in the village, a few hundred rupees a month, and it took away about 90% of the disease in the village, or it could do potentially. Now the Chinese are doing this, but with smartphones. So not distance learning, which of course they're doing too, but distance medicine. And this cuts down the need for institutionalized hospitals and highly trained doctors by 90%. And so you can afford to deal with the problems of aging and new disease. And then you can afford and can deal with the COVID. I mean, they didn't just solve the problem of COVID in a miraculous way, which no other country has replicated at all, with a population of 1.4 billion within a month, from a standing start where no one knew what it was. They didn't stop that. And now China has been stated by the WHO as the only country entirely free of COVID, whereas all around it, even Taiwan and the rest have it. So you don't do that just by being a Chinese. You do it through social organization, through community groups, through government organization, but also through smart technologies. You know, everyone has the technology at their fingertip to test themselves, to isolate, to order food if they're having to isolate. And so if you apply modern G4, G5 technologies to something like COVID effectively, you can deal with a pandemic. And so they have proper test and trace, unlike our shambles. Now, what I think and I guess, is that when the Chinese will do what the Japanese did in the 70s. They took Western technology and they did a quantum development. Sony, Mr. Sony, if you read his autobiography, as I have, whatever he was called, he wasn't called Mr. Sony, of course. He spent months trying to think of a name, and it finally came up with Sony. But when he invented the Walkman, he wasn't just making a better radio. It was a new thing on this earth. Nothing like it had existed before. And the Toshiba laptops, which we went to the Toshiba factory, they were of a different order to previous laptops in their design, functionality, and so on. Just as Bill Gates and so on, Steve Jobs, made something new in the world with their technologies. Now, the Japanese did it in the 70s in electronics and car manufacture. I think what the Chinese are doing now is like the Japanese, but 10 times, 100 times bigger. So supercomputing, super communications, super cities, super green energy, this, that, and the other. Now, how long you can go on doing that, I don't know, but we are in a new industrial and technological revolution in Japan, more or less alone, which will wash back to us. I mean, these technologies will come back and we'll use them too.
I guess the